Hi everyone, welcome to my channel Bibbidi Bobbidi Books. My name is Ellie and this is going to be the Love in Books tag. So I have created an original tag video. This is the first book tag that I've tried to make, so I hope that it's okay and I hope that you enjoy it. But basically, with Valentine's Day just around the corner, I wanted to film something that involved love in some way, but I didn't want to focus in just on romantic love because I feel like there is such a big focus on romance throughout the month of February, and I think it's equally important to celebrate different types of love, be that the love between friends or between family members. And so I wanted to create a tag video that gives me the opportunity to recommend you some books that explore those different types of love. So yeah, I hope that you enjoy this video. If you would like to give this tag video a go, please do feel free to, and I'm also happy for you to change and adapt it as you like as well. I'm happy for it to be an evolving tag, so if you think of anything that I've missed or if you want to change some of the prompts or anything like that, please do feel free to do so. But yeah, I feel like it's going to be quite self-explanatory, so I'm just going to hop straight in with the first prompt. So the first prompt is friendship love, and for this I have chosen The Monk and the Robot series by Becky Chambers. So this is a really sweet sci-fi duology that's made up of these two novellas, the first one being A Psalm for the Wild Built, and I just love this sci-fi series. It is such a wholesome and gentle story about the friendship that forms between a traveling tea monk and a robot. There's honestly not much more to it than that, but it's just so well executed. And I also really love the world building in here as well, because this takes place on a planet where robots have gained self-awareness and they decided to separate themselves from humanity when this happened, and they retreated into the forest and became the stuff of myths and legends. And then in this first book we follow our main character, who is a travelling tea monk, and they end up stumbling across a robot in the forest. And this is a big deal because a robot and a human haven't seen each other in centuries, and we basically just follow the two of them as they're getting to know each other and as they form this really unlikely friendship. And it's just such a beautiful story, and it's about friendship, but it's also about finding purpose in your life, and it can also be quite philosophical as well, which I did enjoy about this story. It does make you stop and think, and I just loved it. So if you're looking for something that's quite slow paced and gentle but has a real lovely focus on friendship, then I highly recommend this series. Next up we have Sibling love. So for this I have chosen the book Small Favours by Erin A. Craig. This is a standalone fantasy book that is loosely based on the Rumpelstiltskin story, and I really enjoyed this story. This takes place in a really remote, isolated village that is surrounded by this impenetrable forest that has been rumoured to contain monsters. And the story takes off when a supply run goes missing, and all the people who live in this village think that the people who went on the supply run have come to great danger. Perhaps they were attacked by monsters in the forest, and there's a lot of fear. So the villagers decide that it's not worth the risk of sending out another group to go and collect supplies, and so they decide to hunker down and try and survive the harsh winter with what supplies they have, which isn't very much. And we basically just watch as tensions build as people are struggling to get by and they're struggling to survive this harsh winter. And there's a lot of paranoia as well going on within this village as strange, spooky occurrences start happening, and we watch neighbours turn against neighbours. It's quite a slow story, but it really builds up towards the end as things kind of descend into quite a lot of chaos, and it's just fascinating. But the reason why I decided to choose this for the prompt of Sibling love is because our main character is a teenager called Ellery, and she is kind of forced to take on this protector role, and she is very much trying to ensure the survival of her siblings. So she has a twin brother and also two younger sisters, and she is just trying to make sure that all four of them survive through to spring. And yeah, that's a real focus in this story. There's definitely a lot of discussion about family and about Ellery's responsibilities and about her feelings towards her siblings and the family dynamic and how things shift as tensions build. And so yeah, this is a really fascinating one, and if you enjoy a story that has that sibling dynamic in it, then you might enjoy this one. I will say though, it is quite scary. Don't be fooled by this cover, because there are some really gruesome and graphic scenes, and as I say, tensions are really built and we get quite a lot of drama towards the end, so just be warned of that. The next prompt is parental love. So for this prompt, I'm happy for you to be quite flexible with it. You could focus in on books that talk about, you know, biological parents, or it could be non-biological parents, it could be found family, it could be, you know, an auntie who acts as a parental figure. Any book basically that talks about the relationship between a caregiver and their child, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that's kind of the idea behind this prompt. But the book that I am personally choosing for this prompt in this video is going to be The Book of Gothel by Mary McMine. So the reason why I chose this book is because I personally felt like a big theme in this story is the theme of motherhood in all its different forms, and I just really loved that about this story. So if you haven't heard of this book before, this is a retelling of Rapunzel, and it's told from the perspective of Mother Gothel, who is the traditional villain in the fairy tale story. And I would definitely describe this as a feminist retelling as well, because there's a lot of focus on women in this book essentially. So the basic premise of this story is that we're following our main character Hailwise, who is the woman who ends up becoming Mother Gothel, and Hailwise is very different from the other people who live in her village. So she has quite a difficult childhood. She has these really dark eyes, and she also suffers with these fainting spells that are unexplained, and so a lot of her villagers are very wary of her. They're quite fearful of her. They think that she might be possessed by a demon or something, and she's very much shunned from the village. And yeah, that makes her life pretty difficult, but she has a lot of support and protection from her mother, who is quite a strong character, and her mother obviously really loves Hailwise and wants to protect her, and so she kind of keeps everyone at bay and really stands up for her daughter. And her mother is a midwife, so Hailwise grows up learning the skill of midwifery, and we see a lot of scenes of childbirth, quite a lot of traumatic scenes as well, as a heads up if that's something that you're sensitive to. So yeah, there's lots of different mothers within this story, but unfortunately Hailwise's mother ends up dying. That's not a spoiler, it's on the back, but that leads Hailwise to have a very different situation. She's in quite a dangerous position when her mother dies, because obviously there's no longer anyone to stand up for her. So she is forced to flee her home, and she runs away and seeks sanctuary in this tower called the Tower of Gothel. And that's kind of where the story takes on from there. But yeah, obviously we have a really strong mother figure in the beginning of the story with Hailwise's own mum, but we also see Hailwise developing her own maternal feelings and her own maternal instincts, which really affect her decisions going throughout the book. And she also is religious, so she worships the mother, who is a pagan goddess, who is both really nurturing and also really fierce, which I just loved as well. So I just feel like this book was a really great discussion about motherhood and all of its different forms, and I just thought it was fascinating. Would highly recommend this to you if you're looking for a fairy tale retelling. Okay, so next up, I thought it would be fun to include a prompt about pet love. And the book that I've decided to choose for this one is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, which I was surprised about. I wasn't expecting to put a Robin Hobb book on my pet love prompt. But yeah, I recently read this book. It's my first introduction to Robin Hobb and the entire realm of the Elderlings. If you haven't heard of this book before, it's the first book in a fantasy trilogy that is the beginning of a wider universe, because Robin Hobb has created this massive series of books that are all interlinked somehow, and this is the first book in the first trilogy, if that makes sense. And this book follows our main character Fitz. It's all told in first person, so it's very much focusing in on him as a character and his experiences. And We basically follow his childhood in this first book because we're introduced to him as a 6-year-old boy, and by the end of the book he's about 14, I believe. So we kind of follow him throughout his childhood years, and they are very informing years because a lot happens to this character. And basically, this character is a bastard, and the first scene is of him being taken to the royal keep by his grandfather and given over to the royal family because basically his grandfather says that he can't afford to keep Fitz alive anymore. He doesn't want to look after him, and he is the king-in-waiting's son, so he should look after him. So Fitz goes into the keep, and no one can deny that he is the king-in-waiting's bastard because he looks so similar to him. The resemblance is striking, and so the royal family have no choice really but to welcome him into their lives, I suppose, and they decide to send him to the stable master. And he starts off working within the stables, so he works with the horses but also the hounds. And we quickly find out that he has a real affinity for animal handling and a real connection to animals, and he almost gets on better with animals than he does people, and that's a really big character trait of our main character. And without going into too many spoilers, this book also contains some different types of magic, and one type of magic is something called the wit, which is seen as a really negative thing, and it basically involves connecting with animals and being able to communicate with animals and form a bond with different animals. And again, that type of magic has quite a big significance within this story. But the reason why this book is called The Assassin's Apprentice is because Fitz ends up being trained up to become a royal assassin because the king decides to utilize his unique position as a royal bastard, because essentially Fitz can mingle with the lower classes without it being strange because he's not really a full royal, he's only a bastard. And he can also, you know, have access to royal parties and royal events and things. So he is quite a good person to choose to be an assassin because he has access to all different areas and he's quite unnoticeable as a bastard. So yeah, he gets trained up to be an assassin. So yeah, that's my book for that prompt. Next up we have romantic love, because I did want to include some romance on this list somewhere, and the book that I've decided to choose for this prompt is Radiance by Grace Draven. So this is a self-published fantasy romance story. I believe it's the first in the series actually, but I've only ever read this first one and I actually really enjoyed it. This is a romance between a human woman and a Kai prince, and it follows several different tropes. It follows the arranged marriage trope, but also the friends to lovers trope. And honestly, I think this is one of the best examples of a friends to lovers romance that I've ever come across. Like, I really enjoyed it. I thought the friends to romance arc was beautifully done, and it was just such a sweet romance. And the thing that makes this story unique is that both of our characters actually initially find each other incredibly physically unattractive because they're both from different races. We have a human woman, and the prince is kind of quite beastly in his appearance. So he has grey skin, he has fangs, he has these weird eyes, and so at first the two of them really can't stand the sight of each other. But what I loved about this story is that didn't put them off from forming a really lovely and respectful friendship. So the two of them really kick it off from the start, and they have a lot of banter between them, which is really funny. I also really enjoyed how we got to read perspectives from both sides within this story, and it was really entertaining seeing things through the perspective of the Kai prince, because he was explaining how he finds quite a lot of the things that we do really disgusting and how he finds our appearance really gross and things like that, and it was just quite eye-opening seeing things from a different perspective. But yeah, what I really loved about this is, as I said before, they form this really lovely friendship at the beginning of the book, and we just see ever so slowly how that friendship turns into something more romantic, and it's just so beautiful. And yeah, if you're looking for something incredibly romantic and incredibly sweet, and if you love the friends to lovers thing, then I would highly recommend this to you. Next up, I thought it would be fun to include a prompt for erotic love, because sometimes you just want all of the spice. So for this prompt, I'm going to choose Neon Gods by Katie Robert. This is a smutty retelling of the Hades and Persephone myth, and it's a very loose retelling. It's basically following our main character Persephone, who is due to be married off to Zeus, but she doesn't want to marry Zeus because he's a terrible person, and this is being forced upon her, and so she decides to take things into her own hands, and she decides to escape, and she runs away, and she runs to the underworld, basically to Hades' realm, because she knows that she will be safe there because Zeus cannot step foot in the underworld. And so she visits Hades, and he protects her and keeps her safe. And listen, you don't go into this book for the plot, okay? You go into it for the spice, because things escalate very quickly between the two of them and things get kinky. Yeah, I enjoyed this one for what it was. I wouldn't go into this one for anything other than the spice, really, because the plot was questionable, but what can I say? I enjoyed the sex scenes, I had fun with it, it gave me what I wanted at the time, and I would recommend it for that. Okay, and the final prompt is self-love, and for this prompt I'm going to choose something that you might not expect for me to choose for this prompt, and I'm going to choose A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This might seem like a strange choice, but just hear me out, because yeah, I'll get to it in a minute, but basically this is a Dracula retelling, and it's a retelling told from the perspective of Dracula's first wife, who is a woman called Constanta, and it's presented in letter format, so it's letters that have been written by Constanta to Dracula, and so it feels like a real personal story. We're really exploring Constanta's thoughts and feelings and her vulnerabilities and her experience of being in an abusive relationship. Do check out the content warnings in this one, because it's not easy at times to read, but I just loved how raw this felt and how quickly you become connected to this main character. And why I've chosen it for the prompt of self-love is because ultimately our main character Constanta has to choose her own happiness and her own freedom over the love of her husband, which I think is something that's really brave and something that's really admirable and something that's certainly not easy. And so I have a lot of respect for our main character for that reason. And yeah, this was just such a beautiful and also incredibly heartbreaking story, and was one of my favourites really that I read last year, and would highly recommend this to you if you think any of that sounds interesting. So yeah, that brings me to the end of this video. I really hope that you enjoyed my answers to all of the prompts. The final question is just going to be to tag some booktubers that you love. So I am just going to tag a whole bunch of people. Please don't feel pressured into doing this video if you don't want to. But if you would like to give it a go, I'd love to hear your answers. And yeah, that's it from me for today. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more from me, and I guess I'll see you next time with another video. Bye!